Before we begin, I'd just like to make an acknowledgement on the behalf of the town of Nantucket for the two missing fishermen who apparently lost their lives off the coast of Nantucket this week. And we just send our deepest sympathies to their families. And we are starting with the NRT, the Nantucket Regional Transit Authority meeting tonight as the advisory board. There is an opportunity for public comment if there's anything that's not otherwise on our agenda. Hearing none, we'll move to the approval of the minutes of March 22nd and September 13th.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we have a public hearing. So I will open the public hearing on an increase in fares and pass rates and turn it over to our administrator.
Yes, thank you. Paula Leary, NRTA Administrator. The purpose of this public hearing is for an increase in the NRTA's fixed route fares and pass rate structure and the implementation of a new annual pass and rates. As you know, the increases were considerations in the funding for year-round bus service. So I will quickly, we don't have a graphic, explain those changes. So the fares will go from routes that are currently $1 to $2. The routes that are currently $2 will go to $3. Seniors, 65 and older, persons with disabilities, veterans, and active military will remain at half fare of the effective fare. The season pass rates, which would be from mid-May to mid-October, the season pass rate that's currently $90 will go to $135. The commuter and off-island or college student that's currently $80 will go to $120. And the Nantucket student and the senior, disabled, veteran, and active military personnel pass will go from $50 to $70. Then there will also be an increase to what we call our short-term passes, visitor passes, the 1-day, 3-day, 7-day, and 31-day passes. 1 day going from $7 to $8, 3-day going from $12 to $18, 7-day 20 to $30, the 31-day going from $50 to $75. And now that we'll be going year-round, we're calling it the new annual pass rates. And I did a prorated for 2018, which is an effective 8 months of service versus the 12 months when we get into 2019. So the annual pass for 2018 would be $150. For 2019, for the whole year, would be $200. The commuter and off-island and college student would be $115. And $150, and the Nantucket student would go from $90 to $120. And the senior, disabled, veteran, active military from $75 to $100. And those are all the rates that, you know, through the year-round service studies and calculations and everything that had been applied to that.
How do you define the commuter?
The commuter is if a business purchases the pass for its employee.
For its employee.
Yep. And that program's been around since '96.
How many of those do you sell?
500, 600.
Wow, okay.
We usually have between 70 and 80 participating businesses.
Okay.
It's been a condition of a number of special permits, right?
Yes. Yep.
This is a public hearing. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak. Okay, hearing no comments, we can close the public hearing. Any board comments? What's the pleasure?
I move approval of the race as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
I was writing. I didn't see. Who seconded?
Rita.
Thank you.
Now there's been a request that 2 members of the board become the NRTA's Finance and Audit Committee and Compensation Committee. Rather than the whole board. This was how it was previously, and it's being requested to go back to that. Do you want to talk about it,
The intent
Paula?
when this started in 2013 from the regulation was to have representatives of the board serve in this capacity and then report to the full board. So it's mostly the preliminary budget, the final budget, the audit report, and then the compensation committee relative to salaries. And the board at the time couldn't get 2 volunteers, so they made the whole board these committees, and it's cumbersome. It's awkward when you're the finance committee and then you're reporting the very next agenda to the full advisory board, and so if I could get 2 representatives, it's really only 4 meetings a year. It's little time. You can get as involved or not involved as you want, but having 2 volunteers to meet and then report to the full board would be really awesome.
I think that makes sense. I know it was confusing to me leading meetings last year. I was like, okay, we do the committee and then we're, so.
So do you want to volunteer?
Sure, I'll volunteer. I'd be happy to.
Who else is looking for another committee?
I'll do it if no one else will. But.
Oh, come on, Matt.
Actually, I'll be on it. 'Cause I've been,
Yeah, you can do it.
Whichever one of you wants to do it.
Yeah.
I can't take anything else on.
No, that's right. I'm like,
Nope, thank you.
Okay, so Jason and Jim, want to take a vote on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Or, well, I guess we need. Any opposed? No, motion carries.
Okay.
and my only other
We need a
comment.
second
Very
on that.
much.
Yeah, just sort of going back to the first one. Ideally, I would love to be able to see us value parking, bring some money in to be able to subsidize NRTA at a higher level. And we have no choice but to raise the fees on NRTA. But I think the NRTA, we have to find a way to make the NRTA cheap or free to encourage people to use it. And I think that, we have to find other ways to fund it. At some point, unless we can't keep adding as many cars as we do every year and think that we're going to be able to drive ourselves out of the problem. And so I think the NRTA is a huge part of the solution. And, I hope that we continue to, the discussions we're having about valuing parking and funding alternatives are really important. And the NRTA is part of it. But way back, back in the comp plan days, there was consultant came and he showed us pictures of what happened. You remember this? My favorite story. He showed us pictures of what the traffic would be like at 20,000 cars and 22 and 23, and everyone sat there and said that will never happen. And when you looked at those numbers, the gridlock was Old South Road, it was Milestone, it was Nobody Farm, it was all all through the middle of the island. That will never happen, Matt. That's craziness, blah blah blah. Well, we've hit those numbers, and that's what's happening. And so the same consultant, I said, well, what happens if we don't do anything? What if we don't limit cars and we don't find a way to encourage people to use alternative transportation? And he said, well, what happens traditionally is you end up closing 1 road or 2 roads downtown. The traffic is worse. Then you have to take one street as an inbound street for buses and cars. Then you have to take another as an outbound. So the traffic gets 3 times worse. And then you're in 3 hours of gridlock every day. And so I think if we don't if we don't figure out how to do this better, that's what we're going to get. So and everyone said can tell me that will never happen. You'll never see it in your lifetime. Well, the other thing happened. This guy wasn't wrong. So I think if we're going to, make the steps that we're trying to make, we have to make the NRTA a huge priority in all of it. So I support tonight, but I hope we find a way to value parking and start putting more money into alternatives.
That's great.
Okay, I don't think there's any other business.
I have nothing for you.
So can we have a motion to adjourn this?
So
meeting?
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Thanks.
Motion
Thank you.
carries. And we will open the December 6th Board of Selectmen meeting at 6:09. I don't believe there are any changes to tonight's agenda, and we'll move to announcements.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. Our sewer director, David Gray, is here, and he's going to give us an update on some of the sewer projects.
Good note myself.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a very busy week this week. The construction has started on Wamasquid area for the pump station and for that whole Hussey Farm, Meadowview, Pondview area. They started at the circle and they're working their way out. They're going to be taking a right and headed towards Somerset and Friendship Lane. As soon as we get word that the asphalt plant will close, we will be coming off of all paved roads and going just onto dirt roads and gravel roads. So that is coming soon. We don't know exactly when, but as soon as we get the word, we're going to be pulling off all paved roads because we won't be able to do any patching. Green Meadows was completed this week. All the laterals have been installed. Pressure testing has been completed. Everything passed, and they're doing the temporary patching tomorrow. So that will be all paved. Tashmore McLean was completed a week or so ago. They're going to be going back in the next few weeks to do the storm drains as part of the contract, clean the drains, the connecting pipes and everything like that. So that's underway. The C Street bypass system has been going flawlessly down at the pump station. Even with the rain that we had last night, I was down there this morning early just double checking, and it's maintaining flows and everything with no problem at all. If anyone has been downtown, you'll notice that the back building's gone. Now the whole demolition has taken place. They've removed all the stuff out of the channels. Surfside, they took and pumped. They poured all the walls today for the one of the buildings that are going up there for that project. So that's moving along nicely. We did 4,700 feet of CCTV work this week so far. All within the, I've been working very closely with Erica on a daily basis or every evening to try to find out where we can go so that we're not in any of the truck route ways or any of the other construction going on. So we've been juggling around town most of this week. We did Westchester, Easton, Lilly, Main Street, Chester Street. So we're moving along very nicely with the camera work. The only other thing to report is the pumps have been built and completed for the C Street pump station, and we actually have to witness the pumps run in a test. That'll be getting done sometime in the next few weeks. It's actually, we have to go to Wisconsin to do that, so there'll be a team from the engineering, most likely myself from the town, and then the contractor will be going out there to witness those run. That was part of our contract, that we would actually physically see these brand new pumps run before they get installed. So a lot of stuff going on. Yeah. Been real busy, and hopefully the camera work hasn't caused anyone traffic headaches, but we're trying to stay out of everybody's way. So, thank you.
Quick question.
Thank you.
You couldn't find a better place to visit than Wisconsin?
That's what I asked, especially in the middle of Fed January.
I was thinking Las Vegas maybe, or
yeah, that's where their factory is. So I've never been out that way.
All right, there you go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, Children's Beach Boat Ramp is continuing to be closed until January 15th for repairs.
Okay, this is the public comment portion for anything that's not otherwise on our agenda for discussion. Hearing none, I don't believe there's any new business. We'll move to approval of payroll and treasury warrants.
I move their approval. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Approval of pending contracts. Are there any questions on the contracts, comments?
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we have some consent items. We have some gift acceptances, and we could make a motion to accept our Island Home Natural Resources and Planning and Land Use Services, but we actually have Girl Scout Troop 66120 here to do a small presentation of their gift. So do you want to make that motion on those first three?
Yeah, I move to approve the Ireland Home Natural Resources and Plus gift acceptances.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Come on up.
I'm Erica Mooney. I am one of the leaders of Girl Scout Troop 66120. We have a fabulous troop with 14 girls. We were lucky enough to get 4 tonight. With us tonight, we have Eliza, Shelby, Elisa, and Hildy. And they are basically just going to go through some of the things that were in your packet tonight about the War Memorial, which is on Federal Street adjacent to the town building, which our troop has adopted for the year. And we've done some very special work there. I hope everybody's had a chance to see it. And we will continue to do so throughout the year. But I'm going to pass the mic.
Nantucket Girl Scout Troop 66120 has adopted the Federal Street War Memorial Garden as its Agent of Change Journey badge. Work to make it a more welcoming place in our community for reflection and remembering loved ones. Following the spring restoration of the monument itself, the girls agreed that the garden was in sad shape. They made a plan, and the result is a more open, vibrant, appealing, and colorful garden in which the focus is on the monument itself as it should be. Troop 66120 would like to thank the following people and businesses for their help in making the girls' vision a reality. Nikki Duarte, Paul Bouchard, Michael Egan, and Eric Patterson of the DPW for meeting the girls, listening to their ideas, and removing the dead and or overgrown trees and shrubs. DPW Director Rob McNeil for making his crew and the machinery available. Julie Hilberg Hunt for teaching the girls about various trees, shrubs, and flowers and bringing their time to fruition. For helping the solicit donations of planting materials, for donating her time and our Flora Abundant gardening crew to do the heavy lifting, and for working with the girls as they helped install the beautiful plants that were donated. Surfing Hydrangea Nursery and Arrowhead Nursery for donating trees, plants, shrubs, and the town administration for allowing us to take on this endeavor. Every year, the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts help lead marches on Veterans Day and Memorial Day, and one of our stops is the War Memorial. Our hope is that other troops will follow our lead and adopt the memorial year after year to continue this community effort. We respectfully ask that you please accept donations totaling $2,893.58 from Julie Hilberg Hunt, Flora Abundant, Surfing Hydrangea Nursery, and Arrowhead Nursery.
We're just going to review a couple slides.
Before a troop adopted the War Memorial, it looked sad. It had no color, dead trees, and the planting beds were bare. On our first planting day, we did a lot. We made the soil healthy by adding nutrients. We also planted tulip bulbs, daffodil bulbs, many evergreens, and different types of plants. This is our troop with Julie Hilberg Hunt. Last week, our troop went downtown to decorate our Christmas tree. We also went to the War Memorial to decorate it for the holidays. We used pine cones, red berries, and evergreens to decorate. The memorial looks beautiful. For the next year, our troop will continue to take care of the memorial. Thank you.
Okay,
So shall we make a motion to accept?
So moved?
second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, girls. It looks beautiful. And this is very special to me because one of those girls is my daughter.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing them. I think that's important to recognize them. It was great.
Okay, next, citizen departmental requests. The Energy Office request approval to execute new supply contract with Nantucket Power Choice Aggregation. Hi, Lauren.
Hi. Good evening to the board. I just have a couple slides to aid in this conversation. So a brief update on Nantucket Power Choice, which is the town's electric aggregation. We've had record low opt-out rates at launch. We saw a percentage of 3.5 versus the typical 6 to 8% that communities see. We're now at record high enrollment numbers, and that's due in part to the very favorable rate we locked into last year. It has consistently beat National Grid for the last 3 seasons, as you can see in the chart below. National Grid's rate currently has increased from the summer rate about 34%, so it's a big jump, and we've seen a lot more enrollments come to the aggregation where they're now saving about $30 versus National Grid's basic rate. In the course of the contract, an average resident who uses 833 kilowatt hours is what we calculated, will see over $200 in savings. So the aggregation has resulted, we know, in 16.1% savings against National Grid's basic service. Next slide, please. I'm here before the board tonight to bring attention to the very favorable market conditions of the electricity wholesale market, and we've been advised that it may be time to execute a new round for procurement. And to do that, I would need the town manager to be authorized to sign a contract on the very date that prices come in. Prices will come in around 10 o'clock in the morning. The town must execute a contract typically by the end of day. So the ask is that based on the recommendation of the Aggregation Review Committee, that the town manager can execute a new contract for our supply, which would take effect in June of 2018.
And how do those rates compare to the current rates?
We see rates rising, but we won't know until we get the new bids. And those are non-committal bids. We can always go back out, say in the early springtime, if we find that the market is continuing to creep upwards due to supply constraints.
So right now they're slightly higher. You don't know where they'll be when you do it, but
from what I've seen with other competitive suppliers, and in September we requested indicative pricing, they're around 12 cents.
Okay.
So I make that motion to authorize town manager to enter into an agreement as outlined by Laura.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And 12 sounds high when you're at 9, almost 10, but we were at 15, 16 not that long ago.
And rates are almost 13 right now, and again, we just see those going up for the next 12 months at least. So.
Next, we have a public hearing in regard to consider an application for new bulk fuel storage license for Harbor Fuel Oil Corporation. I'll open the public hearing. Okay. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this matter? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Does the board have questions, comments?
I just wanted to know a little bit about, there was a comment on a site assessment being done, and that at the end of the 30 years that they would have to remediate the site. And I was just wondering if it's DEP that permits, if we know there's going to have to be some remediation at the end, who ensures that they're properly treating whatever they need to treat in the meantime? And if we've done that site assessment.
Could you answer that?
Good evening. Kenneth Gullickson, representing Harbor Fuel. I think you may have misconstrued that the remediation at 30 years or some other period is only if property is sold back to the town, then it would have to be cleaned up before it was conveyed to the town. But the intent is that it be sold tank farm indefinitely. So there's no set time period. I mean, it's subject to obviously all the same usual hazardous waste types of laws, but there's no set time by which it has to be
So it's more
closed
if
down.
there was a change of use, essentially. If the town were to buy it and there's a change of use, then there's an assumption there'd have to be some sort of remediation.
If needed,
If it
yes.
needed. Okay. That was my only question.
And it was pretty complicated, but there's a lot of, if they decide to do something else, there's a lot of cost sharing for a number of years with the town, profit sharing on the town's part. It's fairly complicated, but the goal was to do something that was fair for those guys and also fair for the town. If we find 20 years out, people are, not using it the same level, things have changed, there's a way for those, but most likely we're going to see these things for the next 50 years. I mean, it's not going to go anywhere.
And we've done that baseline site assessment. If it mentioned in one of the documents, it was an older document, just saying that there would be a baseline assessment of sort of what the conditions of the site are now. Does that not sound familiar?
I believe so. I'm not sure. Have we done it? We have not, but are we doing it or is it up to the town?
As part of our permitting, we will be doing a baseline assessment, which we would make available to the town. And there is a point that I want to be clear on. If we spilled more than 10 gallons or a reportable, you would report that against the site and it would become tracked. And so that's where DEP would be notified. So then if that happened, when we left, we would owe them a response to how we were going to remediate beyond whatever we did at the time. The language isn't put there solely in the event that something happened. It's certainly not our expectation that over the life of this, it's not uncommon for a tank farm to have no issues. And certainly that would be our desire. But we built that in the event something happened. The town did not want liability to manage that if the property was turned over back to them.
We do have the benefit of this being outside of the wellhead recharge district and outside of the harbor watershed district. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
There are some conditions that are in your packet, so we're recommending that it be
With the
approved.
conditions.
Yes. Madam Chairman, if I could also just add, this is a rather subdued end to a very long process. And I don't know if John or Dave wants to say anything about it, but when I first started working here, there was a lot of public discussion at the Board of Selectmen meetings and elsewhere about the removal and relocation of this tank farm. There's probably been 3, maybe 4 studies about this. The most recent one happening in 2013-14. And it culminated in the last couple of years. The board had a couple of members and myself and town council's office working for probably the better part of a year with Harbor Fuel and its associates on this land transaction. And so I'm sort of amazed that there's no discussion at all about this. I'm not complaining, but early on and even into the middle of it, I'm sort of speechless. There was a lot of discussion about
It was
this.
I think it was a 3-2 vote. I think to get to this point, I don't think it was a clean vote. I think it's great, but
I'll let John. John has the history, right? So, but I will tell you, Dave Frederick started in National Grid in the mid-'80s, and the very first committee I was put on was to take a look at this article that had been put in the paper where the fire chief at the time was worried that if there ever was a fire, everything downtown would be disintegrated, and how that needed to be moved, and it was the single biggest risk to all of everything we love about Nantucket. And so it's been from on the front page of the paper year after year to study after study, and so it is a good thing to move this forward. And to your point, I'm okay with it being kind of now accepted and moved on, but it is a little amazing that it seems to be well understood, which is a good feeling for everybody involved, that people get what this is about and why it's happening the way it is.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board when you took this action, but I certainly followed it for many years, and it seemed like the right thing to do, and you did your due diligence representing the town, so I'm confident, and I think it's kind of almost a cause for celebration, so thank you.
This is a culmination of a lot of years of work, and I think Libby can take the credit for pushing us and getting us where we are today. And we thank all of you and the public for helping us. It's something that we've been waiting 30 years, and it's finally happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Can we just add to that motion the 14 conditions laid out by the fire chief? Okay. Who was the second?
There wasn't.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Good job. Town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, guys. We appreciate a lot of hours on this, too. Our first item is a request to modify the winter parking, that's actually should say plan, to retain taxi stand on Straight Wharf. The chief and I had a quick discussion about this at the end of last week. The winter parking enforcement plan included converting the taxi stand on Straight Wharf into 2-hour parking for the winter. And anyway, to make a long story short, that's something of a pain, I guess, and the recommendation is not to do that.
Can we take a vote on that? Yeah, my mic wasn't on.
I move to approve the recommendation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Janet Schulte, who is our helper, rep, special liaison with the Harbor Place project and specifically the Intermodal Transportation Center feasibility study. We're going to try to get the board regular updates on this study, and I think this might be our first one.
It is our first one. Good evening. We've had a month of basically collecting data and getting pieces in line so that our consulting firm, Desmond Associates, could begin to start putting together a base design. In addition to that, we've had work being done by the planning department on a draft zoning warrant article to rezone Harbor Square in preparation for review at the annual town meeting. And so at our meeting that we're holding on December 19th with members of the work group committee, we will be reviewing that work plan, a base design as well that will be coming forth from Desmond, and the zoning warrant article. I'll also be giving you an update on outreach activities that are being worked together with Mr. Frederickson, myself, to reach out to the community about what's going on with the Harbor Place project. I just gave you an assignment, Mr. Fredericks. The outreach plan we'll be developing to talk to the people about what's going on with the Harbor Place project after we have this meeting on the 19th.
That was the intention. And I think, generally speaking, the consultant wants to roll out their thoughts on how to go forward, and the series of steps they want to take the town through so that the town feels fully, knowledgeable on the decisions they make as they march through it. So until we had that, we thought it was really premature.
Great.
Any questions?
I do. The only thing that I was concerned about was the draft zoning warrant article. That's something that feels like we're moving very quickly, and it makes it seem as if the parking garage is a fait accompli. And I'm definitely, at this stage, not comfortable with a zoning warrant article.
I don't know if there's anyone here from the zoning, from Andrew's team. When we brought this up, and I really wasn't here to address this, but when we brought this up a while back, we had sat with the planning department about what we wanted to present, about the idea of forming the committee that we were working with. And, what they had told us was this was the last piece of downtown property that they wanted to move into this particular zone. And so this is in our minds, we said, that's fine. That certainly aligns with where we're trying to go. And I don't think in any way it's meant to say that the garage is on any kind of absolute path of any kind. I think it was consistent with where the town wanted to go with that that remaining piece of downtown. So I do think that you might, or I would ask you to think about talking to the planning board and where they were on some of this, because it was certainly something in their master planning even before we had come forward.
Yeah, and that's something that I will do, it sounds like in the new year, because Andrew's away. I just would be concerned about going so far down the path where it becomes more difficult to come back. And I think there's been a bit of discussion about the zoning, making any zoning changes without understanding what is really on the table for negotiation, as that would be definitely probably our best mechanism for any negotiation.
It's one. I don't know that it's your best. It's certainly one.
Okay. Yeah. that's my main concern. I just feel that it's moving quickly without the public outreach, without some of the, it makes me feel almost like our vote for a parking commission and making some of the movements that we've made for sort of complementary discussion about parking and paid parking almost a farce if we're really putting in place, predicating a parking garage without looking at all the other options.
And respectfully, the one thing I would suggest is that when you look at, when I did this, I think it was, a month ago, the kind of update to say we would hire this consultant, what we talked about in that was the 20 years of work. And I think it's important to kind of come up to speed on all of that, because that's the basis for even the majority of the drivers that the development group is looking at. All comes from the work that the town's been done. Mm-hmm. So again, I think Andrew and his team probably could give you an update of how much public outreach had happened, and then we can provide how we would be doing that going forward.
I'll just chime in. You kind of sound like me, I think, and I actually like the Harbor Place proposal. There's a few things, I like what has been done. I like the work that's been done. The part that hasn't been done on the town side is the impacts on the town and the town budget, town issues, and those are the and I think it's going to be difficult unless we really put a work group together and get working on it to have all the questions answered for town meeting. And, and Dave knows I'm trying to, I'm pushing hard to get some of those things answered. I think that we have to have representation on our side. Like the cautionary tale I told yesterday, that we're the side that worries about the money. We're the side that worries about the impact on the town. We're the ones that have to worry about the budget and pick up the pieces later. And so I think it's very important that those numbers and those impacts get attached to anything, any MOU or any negotiation before, not after. So I'm trying to, I think I like I like the concept of what's happening. I like the people doing it. I think it'll work, but we have to do our due diligence on our side, and and now we have a time frame that's fairly short to do that. So,
I think. In addition to that, I think that a parking garage is part of the solution. We have parking issues, and a parking garage may be a part of the solution, but it's contingent on our ability to manage it and to actually generate revenue. And I feel the same, that until we know what that looks like, it's difficult to be making decisions on zoning. My other concern, and Janet, you may be able to, over the next month, gather information on this, but in my own personal polling of people, it's very unclear as to what the town actually, sort of the public actually wants when it comes to a parking garage. Very few people that I've spoken to have said, yes, absolutely. So I think if it's going to be, if we're going to be discussing it as a public benefit, I just would want to know that the public really wants this. Aesthetics have been a major concern. And some people have, I would say it's 50-50. Some people don't want it at all or don't think there's a need or there's other ways to do it. So I would just be very cognizant of doing the public outreach that is necessary.
Well, that's why we're doing the public outreach.
Well, and
exactly,
I think
get that input. But we have to have a plan to show the public. We voted. We voted to engage this architect. We were very clear about the expectation and the product we were looking for, and I think they're on track to do exactly what we asked them to do. So. I see I don't see necessarily. I can certainly from the optics, but the zoning change is really separate from the intermodal transportation center, and I can understand. So I think that's. But I agree with Matt, and he's we do need to develop this memorandum of understanding. Last week, I asked who's working on that, and Andrew said he and the town manager were working on it. I think it's probably time for the board to weigh in on our expectations, and perhaps we can do that sooner rather than later.
Talk about meeting with council.
Sure. Do you want to?
Or you can go ahead.
Okay. And just add to this, if you will. At our agenda meeting today, we were discussing exactly what you're mentioning. about what ought to be in an MOU and what information we need to determine what should be in an MOU. And we're working to schedule a meeting with the chair and the vice chair and myself with town council to review sort of the mechanics of how an MOU like this would be structured and what things typically are and are not included. And following that, we probably will either come back here and probably come back to the board at open session or executive if it's applicable and discuss terms and conditions that the board might want to see in something like that, what other information you might need. And I'm sure it'll come up at our upcoming work group meeting.
So I would just add for transparency that we add all the board members to that conversation with council. So we're all up to speed. I think that would be of some benefit, especially with Rita's comments.
I think to augment a little bit in terms of the process, this has been a month of collecting a great deal of data from the bus people, the former transportation studies data about ferries, planes, the parking at the airport, tour operators and taxi licenses. It all had to get digested and mashed through by Desmond, and that until that's done and we get to see it at the very first meeting of this group, then we'll have an opportunity to really structure that kind of outreach about which you speak and get the kind of feedback that we're talking about.
So let me go back to the meeting with council, and I know I would make a motion that the entire board meets in executive session with town council to evaluate what, from the town's perspective, should be the elements of an MOU.
Well, I'll second it so we can discuss it.
Okay. I was just thinking not that we wouldn't bring him before the whole board, but we're just going to have a very preliminary discussion with council to sort of engage him to talk to the developer about what things should be in it and then bring a draft to the whole board, which I would assume would probably be an executive session item.
Yeah, I'd want to.
But we'd have to confirm that.
Yeah.
Or it will be open session.
Yeah.
Either way, we'll bring it to the whole board.
Yeah, I was thinking more that this sort of preliminary discussion with town council would be just nothing to do with the developer yet, but on the town's end, what sorts of things ought to be in an MOU like this, and then bring that information to the full board along with the discussion by the full board as to what other items that the board might want to include. But it's certainly up to you all about scheduling a meeting. I would want to find out if executive session covers this kind of preliminary mechanics conversation.
So I would ask you to vote in favor of this motion so all board members can be part of the conversation at the beginning stage.
So I guess let's say it's not a executive session issue initially. Is that so? We would set an agenda, and we would notice and have all of us available. Is that what you're asking, Jim?
Well, can John?
Well, I think it was clear what I was asking for.
Well, maybe to you, but maybe not to me. I'm saying.
So do you want to repeat the motion?
Well, I'm just wondering if John can be at next week's meeting.
I think he can be.
Okay, so if he can be here next week, we can have
Just
the
do it at the
discussion
meeting.
at the regular meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do we need a motion? We don't need a motion for that.
Well, I'm going to vote on Jim's
Okay.
motion.
Yeah, so that-
But I was just,
clarifying,
detailing when we would do it, if that's okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very
unanimously.
much.
And the other thing is, I think we have to be clear. There's more than just Desmond's work on the garage. That there's more data gathering than just Desmond's work on the garage. There's sort of the zoning change and the impacts of that. It's fairly substantial, and what are the impacts of that? Those have to be quantified and understood, I think, by us. And, so that's part of what I'd like to get our hands around.
So did you want something laid out from planning in regard to the zoning change?
Well, we
because
asked
I
for
think
that.
Andrew's away, right?
Yeah, we asked for that last week, and I'm assuming we'll see that. And it may be that we need to have an appraisal of the property in one manner and an appraisal of the property in another manner. And not, there's different, we have to, basically, what I've found a couple different times in these big, wide-ranging issues is that we're putting the cart before the horse sometimes, and we're working on someone else's schedule, and then we don't make the best decisions for the taxpayers of the island, because we're working on someone else's agenda. We need to make sure we're working on our agenda. And that's and I'm trying to get ahead of it, because we are on someone else's schedule now. So how do we work and get ahead of it?
So as Janet outlined, that's the topic for the work group meeting on the 19th.
Exactly.
Now, if you want to, you're welcome to come. That's an open meeting. It's posted, and that's when we're going to see the draft zoning articles. If we want to get them sooner, we could, but that was.
I think that's taking it a step further in wanting a comparison of exactly what's required under current zoning compared to the zoning change, because there's certain ground cover changes, parking requirement changes, a number of things that impact what you can do under one zoning as opposed to the other.
Like I know it generally, but
Yeah.
I don't like it's.
We
it's
wanted
5,000
it,
square
like,
feet to 3,750. It's 50 feet of frontage to 30. It's it's parking requirements to no parking requirements. It's set height to a higher height. And so what are what is the impact of that on the various aspects of the government, and what how does that how do we fit ourselves within that? How do we? So that's I think. And I think sometimes it's like, well, that's just what we're doing downtown. Well, some people have come to me and said, well, that's not necessarily, they're opposed for different reasons. I think we have to make sure that we have done our due diligence so that we can back it and all be on the same page. So.
Okay.
So
we're having town council come next week. And we're having the meeting on the 19th, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm looking for clarity on. I appreciate the motion to make us all part of it. It's not clear to me how the zoning can be separate from the parking garage when we're sort of looking at it in conjunction with the two. And I want transparency. I want to understand the public benefit versus the private gain, and I suppose. Really just understanding the numbers and the management plan, because I do think right now it feels very much cart before the horse, and I think that in a perfect world, I think we would have some sort of paid parking, some other mechanism to address our parking issues before just rolling right in with a parking garage. So hopefully next week we'll clarify some of those questions.
Okay. Do you think we can have the draft articles for next week? And a zoning chart comparison?
I will certainly ask. Janet and I can ask. I don't think we have it yet, do we?
I have the draft article, but I don't have a comparison of one to the other, but I can certainly follow up with that in the morning.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the town manager's report is DPW director is going to give us an overview of the proposed new DPW garage. Do you want to introduce?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While I have the opportunity, I'd like to introduce the DPW's new Central Fleet Manager. We have with us tonight Mr. Eric Johnson, if you'd stand and be recognized. Eric's originally from Vermont, is now living here full-time. His daughter and grandson living here as well. He's got extensive fleet management experience, as well as extensive quite a varied background in managing everything from farms to nonprofits. He's been a fire chief. He's also got experience with local fairground, running a fair. So we're very excited to have him on board. He's already made some instant impact. So thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
So thank you for giving me this opportunity. We're looking at what's been, from what I can find in the history in the files, something that's been looked at as far back as 1999 for some improvements or replacement of DPW garage space. So as the most recent feasibility study, the needs assessment and feasibility study final report that you were given in your packet was published in January. That's this 3-ring binder. And that essentially culminated, I think, a year and a half of interviews with staff for needs assessment, as well as studying some of the history, some of the site constraints, and talking with other departments and looking at different restrictions to be able to come together to find what was most suitable. Various concepts were put together and vetted, and ultimately it was decided that a single garage structure, single building structure, among the other campus improvements made the most sense and was the preferred alternative. So just walking through the programming assessment again, interviews with staff mostly and taking a look at the inventory. Actually, when Eric first started and looked at the town's data, we're looking at roughly 264 vehicles, town-owned vehicles. That includes police and fire, but a significant majority are DPW vehicles. That does not include small equipment. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to ultimately get inside. We could take a look at some pictures.
Can we stop there? When
Sure.
you said the assumption it ultimately needs to get inside. Can you just tell us how you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, well, if we look at the campus today, as we show on the screen here, we have essentially, just to introduce people that haven't been to the DPW site, out here on Nantucket Road, Gate 3, we have an administration building with a parking lot that's accessible to the public. We have employee parking areas. We have a mechanics garage bay, salt shed, and some equipment storage outbuildings. We have basically the crew garage, and we have 2 other outbuildings that were salvages from the Islands Recycling Program. So these are just buildings that have been up on staging for extended periods of time. At this point, most of the structures out here, other than the DPW admin building and the mechanics garage, are really not suitable for redevelopment or even continued use. We have a small shop that the facilities group works out of, and you can see just from the aerial here that largely our fleet of vehicles stays outside. There's very little storage space inside for these quite expensive vehicles. I'd say the top 10 pieces in the fleet that are relied upon for snow and ice as well as other use, the tally's just over $1.5 million. We have some other equipment that we're looking to bring onto the fleet, the VACCON, for stormwater purposes in the future. That goes $300 just by itself. And it is very clear that the environment out here, from the salt to the sand, the wind and the rain, is a bit, it's extremely harsh on vehicles. And there's a lot of efficiencies that we would realize by getting vehicles inside, equipment inside, and having a single building for our staff to assemble in and deploy from daily. It's just a close-up. Some of the deficiencies identified: undersized facilities, unsafe working conditions due to limited space. Many buildings have exceeded their useful life. Some code issues in our workspace. And then as mentioned, high-value equipment stored outdoors. So again, we looked at, had several meetings with town staff. This is prior to my time here, but looking at space needs, did a site walk, looked at all the different spaces, prepared some programmatic sketches, and then when I arrived sometime after April, June timeframe, I sat down with the new deputy director, myself, the newly formed building committee, and the engineers to review what they had done and provide our own input to revise that. And ultimately, in rough pictures here, essentially we're looking to replace the fuel station to the front and center, replace the salt storage area to the rear, locate the central garage right basically in the middle, and maintain the two existing spaces, the mechanics bay garage and the admin space with public access.
I have a question.
Sure.
Didn't we just replace the roof on that salt building?
The salt shed it sustained some damage. It was not completely replaced. There was a portion of it that was replaced due to wind damage that was covered under insurance.
Okay, thanks.
Rob, just while we're talking about roofs, what sort of roof is on the vehicle storage? Is that a rounded roof, a flat roof, a pitched roof?
We're talking for the new building?
Yeah.
The new building, we're going to be looking into the possibility of incorporating solar into the roof. Right now, the building design itself is not complete.
And how much of the energy load do you think you'll be able to take care of with solar?
It's a very early, we just have started conceptually speaking about it, so I hope to have some of that information at a later meeting.
Great.
Thank you. So it sort of can give you a rundown of where this program has been. It started in the $25 million range with roughly 33,000 square feet of building space with an additional 6,000 square feet of covered canopy storage attached to the side of the building. Rev 1 was ultimately the culmination of the final report. The feasibility study that you have in your packet, which was pared down to $20 million. That included essentially 29,000 square feet of space as it's laid out here. When I got a hold of it and looked at modifying what the engineers had already looked at and revised version 2, we eliminated the wash bay and pared down changed some of the spaces. As you can see, the workshop space actually increased, and the employee facilities actually increased. We eliminated the renovation of the mechanics garage with the vehicle wash bay and got the space down to 17,000 square feet total. I'm sorry, just under 27,000 square feet total, and ultimately we ended up at 18 million. There's a third version that we looked at, which ultimately maintains the same spaces accommodations, but reduces the cost by basically eliminating the site cost, the non-building spaces outside of the DPW new garage, which would be a fuel station, the salt shed, and ancillary costs associated with paving.
So when you say eliminates them, do you mean not do them, or they come from another budget?
Exactly. They would be done. They would be done.
Is it not do them, or
no, it
comes from another budget?
It would be a different budget. It would be trying to get them through the DPW operating budget and try to do it internally.
So it's a move-in of the dollars, not changing the project.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, but it also uses your staff to do that, takes it away from other things.
That's right.
Possibly.
That's right. So we're looking at various options, and not saying one's greater than the other, but I really think it makes more sense to really break down the costs here, because these are very large numbers, and you can relate them back to what the engineers have presented in the feasibility study, and we can walk it down. I'm looking at revision 3. I'm sorry, I'm not going to refer to that. I'll refer to
what page? Just you've got 1, 2, 3 in original.
Yes.
What page are they page 107? Is that the?
I have no idea.
Sorry, I can.
Well, here,
Yep.
it's got Yeah, which is here's 107. And then we've got this, we've got like 4.
The preferred alternative is actually in, I think it's Appendix A, which is the one I showed on the screen as
We've got
one.
a bunch of different pictures. I'm trying to connect this picture to those numbers.
We'll send this around tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, I can go back. This is basically this is the revised $18 million, which is shown here as revision 2. It actually shows, in addition to the building program, it shows the fuel station here, Matt, in the front to the north, and then the salt storage area in the back. So, as the if you looked at the cost estimate at the rear of the feasibility study, what it gets at is the building costs associated with this $6 million. $6 million, which is obviously substantially less than the numbers that you're seeing up there. We're talking about employee facilities, shops, vehicle equipment storage, and cost for specialty foundations, for the heated foundations. $6 million for 26,000 square feet. So it's relatively, the cost is about $230 a square foot. What accelerates that is some of the other things included in the overall cost. But in the end, we're still looking at, with build out of that space, just a hair over $7 million. What the engineer has carried since beyond the $7 million is a 2% market adjustment, 10% design contingency, and then 5% escalations from last year and next year of 5% each, with a Nantucket factor of 40%, which raises the overall cost per square foot to $465 a square foot. This is basically a large warehouse to hold vehicles.
A big tin building, basically.
Right, with some built-out space for training and some bathrooms. So, but the reality is, if we look at some of the projects that have hit the ground and running this year in a very competitive and accelerated construction market, I believe the water company project is paying around $1,000 a square foot, which is well over double this adjusted factor. And add to that, on top of that, is the soft costs, the stuff that is yet to be determined, but it's the architectural and engineering fees, services, OPM fees, the final furnishings for the building, temporary facilities, printing, legal, commissioning, abatements, testing and inspections, and a 6% contingency. So again, there's a $3 million soft cost attached to the top of that. So the reality is, this is in my opinion, whatever format we want to look at, and back to Selectman Kelly's discussion about what this project really is, and do we want to shift the costs around to, we recognize that there's certain improvements to the campus beyond just the building that are required to be done. Are we going to do it as part of this capital ask, or are we going to try to do it with DPW staff on town time, away from O&M? So more than anything, Madam Chairman, we wanted to come tonight and let you know where we're at. Town manager has put together a building committee to support me in this effort, and we're planning to meet again on the 18th to further discussions. And we've met with Capcom. We've been presenting this project in front of Capcom as recently as this morning. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have at this time.
What's Capcom's feedback? Anything?
We've gotten all kinds of feedback. In fact, before we go, I'd like to show a quick video. It's 1.5 minutes long, sort of highlights what you may not want to visit, but at least you have a chance to see what the existing space is like up there for the staff. And it would be helpful, I think, to take a look at.
Rob, one quick question while it's loading. The orange line in the drawings, what does that delineate?
It's probably a habitat delineation line.
Okay.
I have a question, while it's loading too.
Sure.
So I figured out, I found the right picture, I think. And so they're coming in next to the fuel and they're going out on the other end?
I think
vehicles?
The
vehicle storage?
Yes, so the flow pattern would be one way. It's going to be angled parking inside the building.
Okay, so
they're
not
in one
stacked up.
Correct.
They're
Yeah,
angled,
it's
okay.
in one, out the other.
Gotcha. And is that large enough to cover all of the vehicles?
Yes, that, and we should have some reserve capacity as well. Thank you.
Do you know how long that extends the vehicle's useful life?
I would say we don't have exact data, and we're also looking at, putting vehicles in there for the first time in their lives, so they might be 5 years into this. What we do expect is a long-term realization that our moving forward, that our the reinvestment into vehicles that we currently or we're going to be bringing on, we're going to be increasing the life cycle of what we currently need. So it's going to be delaying repurchases of replacement vehicles.
By can you quantify that? And I'm looking for how much savings we're going to realize in this expense.
I could tell you 5 years, but it's very difficult to say until we start to realize there's actually no vehicles that I'm aware of that we dedicate to inside climate controlled storage currently. So I don't think we have anything to gauge it against. What I can say is I can look at the airport as an example. I've been through lots of different facilities here. The airport is a really close comparison to what we do, not with the fire response, but their actual equipment storage building. And frankly, you can go in and look at almost the identical loader that we operate, and it's quite old, but it looks like it's on the showroom floor. I mean, it is a stark, and I would invite anyone who's interested in not only this project to get up and come see DPW. We're happy to give you a tour anytime, but to as a comparison, to go look at the equipment storage building at the airport as a comparison.
But there must be some industry standards that you could consult.
There's lots of industry standards.
Let me finish. So it could identify the impact of storage on a vehicle versus outside. So
sure,
that might be worthwhile. I think that's really, to me, kind of a fundamental question.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jim. I don't think that there is the point is that I don't think that's going to justify this project. The cost of the savings of getting everything inside is not the fundamental justification for the project. We have facilities that are not serving the needs of the department. We're looking to come together to try to replace the garage. Part of that is getting everything inside to take advantage of increasing the life cycle of the vehicles. Absolutely.
But if you're not getting the payback, that may question, that would probably lead to a conversation about the need for vehicle storage at all for me.
I mean, what I'm struggling with is that this is the first time that this project and this dollar figure has risen up this year. And we have a number of other facilities over here, the town building, other things that we've been talking about. We're about to ask for about a $15 million override for road improvements. We, in our strategic planning, identified 3 areas that this actually doesn't fall under as our top priorities. I'm just not, and I think the DPW is incredibly important. I'm just trying to justify how we're going to jump this ahead and ask for this right after building a brand new school, doing a massive sewer project, and just getting a fire station approved, and pushing it ahead of others. So that's why I wanted to talk about it now, and that's what I'm struggling with. Not that it's not a good idea in a lot of ways.
Provincetown had a financial impact of storing vehicles. They had a study done, Weston and Sampson did one for them, and they were saying 30 vehicles. For a fleet of approximately 30 vehicles, it was determined that a community would pay an additional $4 million over the life of the building if the vehicles were stored outdoors. So $4 million on 30, you've got 60?
Well, what I would say is, so yes.
Yeah, so just rough.
Yep.
You know, I'm just saying if you're looking at potentially $8 million. I'd say Provincetown is similar to Nantucket, and Nantucket is, 60 versus 30 approximately. Sure. So you're talking $8 million. It starts to look, if that's, and they have caveats here. They're saying, you still have to wash it and you have to maintain it and take care of it and all those things. But if you do that, it was going to save you $8 million.
So that kind of savings is helpful in terms of looking at the whole picture.
I guess from my perspective, part of the discussion here is that we're not looking at a return on investment as a traditional business would. We're in the business forever, right? As municipal services, we're not going away. So my point is that we're doing everything we can to improve the efficiencies of not just that part of the business, but recognizing that is one piece of it that's going to contribute to long-term efficiencies and savings and contribute to the return on investment for the entire project. Little things like getting vehicles started in the morning, getting them idled and to a temperature that they're now going to function because they've been out all night overnight in the snow particularly, to be able to provide service is a real issue. That's an operational challenge that contributes to lost time. When you start multiplying that times staff numbers and long term, you really start to see some major efficiencies with being able to get into a vehicle, start it, and go. And be ready in the morning with a vehicle full of a truck or a service vehicle full of equipment that's going to support the effort, instead of coming back to the shop, offloading it into the small tools and equipment into the garage, and then having to reverse that process in the morning. Having that set up in the morning to be able to get out and go in 15 minutes as opposed to 45 minutes, that can make a real difference when you start multiplying it over numbers of staff.
And here's another point in this thing to Provincetown that Weston Sampson did. Impacts to the environment. Basically, they're saying that storage of vehicles will capture any leaks, capture any problems. That's something that we talk about out there all the time. Is what's the impact of everything going on out there? I'm assuming that this would have to have the same sort of system.
Sure, it's called a site or use of higher potential pollutant load under DEP rules, and ultimately that would be incorporated into a new paved parking lot where you'd have capture control and you'd have oil water separators, that sort of thing. The site predates any of those modern amenities, and we would definitely try to take advantage of this opportunity to do
And that's
those.
included in that number, I assume.
Well, that's going to be dependent on whether we're doing site improvements outside of the building or not.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they're certainly been discussed, and they're considered in the 18 figure or above.
But inside the building, you'd have to have it because you're building
Yes.
the code. So basically, what they're saying is anything that drips out of these things is going to get captured and not go into the estuary, not go into the harbor. So I think that's another positive.
But there's ways to do that with surface parking, is what I think we heard, without a building.
There is, but you'd have to redesign your entire surface parking. You couldn't have a big dirt parking lot anymore.
No, that's part of the plan. So,
Yeah.
to do that. So that's not really an argument for the. I don't see it as for the inside storage, because there's a way to do it on a surface parking lot. So I just want to ask another question, which is, there are a lot of commercial enterprises on the island who have big vehicles, big trucks, who deal with the same need to get things running in the morning, or they can't run their business, deal with the same elements, impact, like Toscana. Who has vehicle storage like you're talking about on Nantucket?
Toscana does.
Yeah, I think most of the big firms have internal storage for their fleet. I mean, I'm not every single vehicle, but I'm not intimately familiar with everyone's operation.
Well, I think it'd be interesting to know what other. So that would, I'd be interested in knowing that.
Sure. I will say this is This is, I've been around a lot of public works facilities in my career, and I have not been involved with one yet that has the amount of equipment outside like this one does.
I would also just say that from a business point of view, that those replacements, and that's all considered cost of doing business. So ultimately the client ends up paying for it, whereas our taxpayers end up paying for it. So if a business isn't properly storing their vehicle and they have to replace it, that cost gets passed on to the client. The same way we'd be passing it on to the taxpayer. And I think that, did you say our top vehicles are worth $1.5 million? The top
Yes.
3?
Top 10.
Top 10?
Yeah.
So if we have millions of dollars worth of vehicles, then I think it would make sense to properly store them.
Well, that gets to the issue of that's a pro forma. There's a business plan. So we could do a business plan that would talk about return on investment, which would be the cost of the vehicles, their useful life compared to the useful life inside a building, and that would be a number. What I just heard Rob say is that this building doesn't cover that analysis, but I think it's a good one. We should do that, absolutely.
So I think just to clarify what Selectman Kelly was talking about, and just my comment was that the return on investment as it relates specifically to storage of vehicles inside is a very small portion of one of the efficiencies that would be realized by having that vehicle inside. As an overall project cost to justify just the efficiency realized with life cycle improvements for bringing the vehicle inside, I don't think that would be something to just solely weigh against the cost.
I would just also like to make a plug for the fact that what is often left out of classic return on investment and life cycle assessment is the environmental cost to the town of Nantucket to dispose of vehicles that if we factor in that we're going to be replacing them every 10 years because we're storing them outside, there's environmental cost to that I don't think usually gets captured in return on investments in the classic life cycle assessment. And I think that would be important. I think, again, as an island with waste issues, that should be something we should take into consideration.
No, but is there an ability to, say, build this garage to house those 10 vehicles rather than to house all the vehicles?
Sure.
I mean,
we could build any kind of space. I mean, the point is,
what would the cost difference be is the question.
Well, it looks like there's a small vehicle storage and large vehicle storage. So,
yeah, I think most of the high turnover fleet would be could be accommodated in a canopy section, which is technically outdoors, but it's canopied, so you're out of most of the elements. But it's protected from the predominant wind, so you're not getting the sand and salt spray that we have seen. You have the heavy equipment, the stuff that is some of the stuff that is seasonally used could possibly be stored in canopied areas as well, which is why we incorporated that into the overall project. I think, like I said, this is still a very early discussion phase of the project, and when we're talking about a project cost, the real cost around $7 million, and the rest of those right now, even though they've been identified, these are still very, I would call them very conceptualized numbers because of the markups associated with not just the project and the island, but the uncertainty of the market. We've seen some really high numbers. We've seen some very competitive numbers for the most recent utility project. So I think, the publication that was presented and is in your packet from January, goes pretty far to, it's essentially doubling the number or more than that.
Do we have the ability, if the goal is to bring this forward at this town meeting for a vote, to do it like we did with the fire station and issue the RFP and get a real bid so that we have a concrete dollar figure to bring forth?
I think that makes a lot of sense. We could go forward with one thing I'm going to be working with the building committee and the town manager on is to find out how we want to proceed. Today was really to introduce a little bit of the need, the history, and what we have found so far. I would love to see the project move forward sooner than later. It sounds like, at least from your perspective, it feels like the project would be cutting in line with something else. So I think all that should be considered. Absolutely.
And maybe you look at the landscape and decide that some other some other phasing might be appropriate in terms of vehicle, your attendant buildings, and postponing maybe some of the vehicle storage, but because it's a big number, $20 million. It's a huge number. And
we did look at phasing it, and I will say that I'm not a fan of phasing.
No, I understand. Yeah, but if you
only
don't have a
because
budget, so
but the point is, when you're going to build something like this, it's really a big warehouse, and so the cost is really it's significantly cheaper per square foot to have it done once, and with the needs and some reserve capacity designed into it, so you're not maxed out from day one.
Madam Chair, just real quick for the video.
Yes, please.
I think it's important that everybody goes and takes a walk around this facility. It's eye-opening. But I think one thing we're focusing on is can the vehicles go inside, and what's the return on investment? And that is important. It's a big part of it. But I think when you look at an operation, an organization, do they have the tools to succeed? I ask myself all the time, even in a small coffee shop. Sometimes it's no. I think they have the tools. You have the vehicles. But will this new facility, make your operations run more smoothly? Is it morale for the staff? This is the first time in the last year or two that we've gotten full staff. We've always had 5 or 6 people, positions empty. So I think there's a bigger picture here to it, and we know if we wait 5 years, it's going to be more. It's going to cost us a lot. The second thing I want to say is Capcom has dug into this for an hour and a half this morning, and we looked at it a month ago too. We brought it back because it's a big deal, and they really went after Rob today on everything, so they're really looking into it. But I think it's not just the vehicle storage inside. There's training rooms, and what I don't want to see is us to nickel and dime it, pull it down, take away the basement, like the fire station, take away training room spaces. I want to do it right, and if we have to wait another year, if we need to be fiscally responsible, that's fine. But I'd like to see facility built correctly for 30 years out. And it was good to hear that there's a little bit of room to grow in this version, as conceptual as it is. Thank you.
So in looking at this, I would just ask you to say, it's a minute and a half long. Would you work here? These are recycled buildings. Thank you. Thank you.
Next item is monthly town management.
Just Tobias Glidden, 24 Rugged Road. I just wanted to come in and say I've actually been out to that facility. When I first was on the board, when I first got elected, I went and took a tour of it. And I was out there recently, got another tour of it. And I could say, if we could do one thing as a town, regardless of our priority, if you were any landscaping company, construction company, Toscano, Holgates, you name it, the first thing you were to do would be to get a new building to run an efficient operation, because it would help so much in innumerable ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tobias. Okay, monthly town management activities report. So remember, these are just highlights of some things we've been working on. It's not exhaustive, but just meant to give you some ideas. Personnel, we've still got some lingering union negotiations and/or mediation for some contracts that expired in June 2017. DPW laborers fire, and there are also some school union units and airport. The Island Home Administrator search is continuing.
We were looking at people coming back for a second interview. Has that?
I'm going to be talking to you about that. We have somebody coming back in January.
Okay, good.
And I'll let you know the dates on that. Deputy DPW Director Chuck Larson is going to be leaving, unfortunately, and we're starting a search for his position. Meetings, got a lot of meetings going on. They're listed here. I won't go through all of them except for a couple maybe more notable ones. Nantucket Water Quality Improvement Study. Rita has been helping with that a bit, and we had a meeting earlier in the week. Is Courtney still here? No. We had a meeting earlier, maybe that was last week. Can't even remember. I think it might have been last week. With staff and our consultant who is developing a scope of work for the study. And to make a long story short, we're going to be meeting with some of the Nantucket representatives in a week or two to get at that. The chairman and I and some others met with Senator Sear and a representative from the Department of Public Health. I think Selectman Kelly was supposed to be there, but you were off doing another town matter. And we had a really good meeting with him. It was focused primarily on the Island Home, and then a couple of other things came up. But with regard to the Island Home, I think we ended up in a good place where Senator Sear is going to prepare a letter to DPH asking things like if the town were to seek to construct a new facility or a modified facility somehow at the current site, what would the issues be? I think that was sort of basically how we ended up.
That's great.
Yeah, it was. We had a good discussion with him. There were a couple of other things he talked about, pending Airbnb, the pending Airbnb tax, room occupancy tax, and then room occupancy tax increase, which could fund a water protection trust. So he wanted to know our thoughts on that. He's going to send us the legislation. There might have been a couple other things, but I was focused on Island Home.
So it's the main points.
The ad hoc budget work group has met, and that is a group set up years ago that has the chair and vice chair of Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, School Committee, along with Finance Director, Town Manager, and School Superintendent. We've met just to kind of go over budget issues. Got a lot of projects going on. These are just a few of them. The fire station, as we know, has been approved. Thank you to the voters. And we're going to be having a meeting next week, I think, to start talking about the timeline and the work schedule. WPI projects are well underway, and they are being presented next Tuesday, I believe, from 12 to 4 in this room. And we're working on a coastal resiliency plan. We've got a contract, as the board knows, with a consultant, and I'm going to be getting a meeting going soon with some interested parties. The Sconset flagpole, I think, is well underway, so finally, and should be ready by Daffodil, which is great. And then some other items, strategic planning. Board, as the board knows, we've got a couple of retreats scheduled in January and February, and we're working on coordinating those. Landfill contract expiration and a work group. I may have mentioned this one sort of recently, but I'm working on getting a charge and a membership together. I've talked with our solid waste consultant and with the DPW director about this work group, and if anybody wants to give me any ideas or input on it, I'd be happy to take it and then hopefully present something to you in January-ish. We have the new Town Talk radio show. I think some of you or all of you are going to be contacted to be guests on it sometime over the next few months. Parking, we're working on getting a follow-up meeting with staff pursuant to the recent board votes on that, and working on bringing some information back to the board. And we had our annual employee appreciation event back in November. So those are some of the things.
I just want to say that the employee appreciation event was great, and thank you to everyone who organized that.
Thank you.
We only have committee reports under Selectmen's reports and comments. Does anyone have any?
I just have one item and Libby reminded me, a group of us, 4 of us, went up and met with Speaker DeLeo last Thursday at the State House to make a plea for his support for our housing bank bill. It's been favorably reported out of committee, and the committee chairman has met with Speaker DeLeo to that point. We had the opportunity to, again, review with him why this was important, why Nantucket is unique, why this isn't a slippery slope. He's pretty inscrutable, but he was, I will say, he was very engaged with each one of us, listened carefully, and we will know if he's willing to move the bill forward in the next 60 days.
Great. Thank you.
If no one else has anything, I forgot to mention something. I should probably try to do this a little more often, but just in case, for board member informational purposes, at next week's meeting, some of the more notable items are going to include the town administration general fund budget presentation for the next fiscal year. We're going to be reviewing fiscal 19 capital projects. There was some discussion today at the capital program committee about, and in response to some board comments recently about when are you going to be seeing them. So we'll have a list of them to review with you, along with some potential funding sources. We're going to be reviewing the citizen warrant articles that came in. And we'll have that discussion about the Harbor Place Memorandum of Understanding, structural sort of discussion, as well as the zoning article. And a citizen is asking to be on the agenda to discuss a potential non-binding ballot question that I believe has something to do with erosion.
Libby, is there anything with Vineyard Wind at all? So I know their RFP or bid.
We have a tentative item on the agenda. Okay. I think we are expecting some additional information, specifically photo simulations, which I understand aren't going to be ready till January. And there was a couple of other things. Tobias, I think Lauren is going to be getting back to you on those. Right.
Just the question that came up today, were if the photo simulations would be ready, and would it be better to put it on an early meeting in January?
Yeah, so thank you, Tobias Glidden again, 24 Rugged Road. It's, as soon as the visual simulations are done, they'd love to come over and present to the board, to the whole community as a whole. But they would like at this time to, get on the agenda, kind of give you an update in the process since they've been here last, Richard and Eric. And the hope is to entertain that the board would be supportive of signing a letter of support for the project. And the reason why that's important is the bidding process for the project. The bids are submitted on December 20th. And so basically how this works is, since there's 3 projects being bid out currently, that, if the other 2 projects won, Nantucket would receive no benefits. If Vineyard Power won, Nantucket could receive a number of benefits in various capacities. So it's just an opportunity, if the board wants to be supportive of a letter or just hear the updates of how it has evolved, great. If not, that's fine. But it would be nice to be on the agenda.
Okay. Thanks.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.